speaking about.
Good day to you, Guyana, and welcome to another edition of Facing the Nation. I'm Malika Ramsey. You caught me a bit off guard there. You know, these things do happen, especially when you have pleasant guests like the one I have in the studio with me today, who I must thank him for responding. Despite he's extremely busy, and today we're going to tell you why we're going to be talking about why he's extremely busy at this point in time. Last week we had a lengthy discussion and we got some statements from Minister Harmon regarding government involvement and government's effort to bring relief to those persons who are victims of Hurricane Irma. Not only our own people, meaning Guyanese, living in those hurricane-ravaged regions, or in this case, islands. Two of the islands who got hit the most were Barbuda and St. Martin, not only to help our own people there, but to give as much assistance as we possibly can. You also heard from the Minister of State last week that our efforts will also go through SEDEMA. Today you'll get a little more details from the man who is very soon, in a few very short hours, will be leading a team to St. Martin as it relates to us lending assistance again for those who were affected by Hurricane Irma. It is my pleasure to welcome back to Facing the Nation the Minister of Citizenship, the Honorable Winston Felix. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, Malika.
All right.
Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. Viewers, I should also tell you that Minister Felix is a member of the Ministerial Task Force on the Caribbean disaster. Yes, he's also a member of that. So this puts him in a really good position to represent Guyana on this level. Minister Felix, let's talk about your upcoming trip. Again, as I said, viewers, in a few very short hours, he will be leaving to render assistance, of course, supported with a team. Let's talk about your team, first of all, in terms of how much you can reveal those persons who will be accompanying you, and exactly, specifically, which island are you going to?
Thank you very much, Malika. I am leading a team of government officials drawn mainly from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Citizenship, and the Department of Immigration Services. We were meeting, and when I say we, I mean the Ministerial Task Force had been meeting throughout the week because of the paucity of information with respect to our Guyanese nationals in the hurricane-stricken island. Those islands being Barbuda, you have the Turks and Caicos, and you have St. Martin. We had very little information to work on, and so movement outward of Guyana may have been wasteful in terms of the utilization of resources. And so yesterday, we were able to get some information, which has put the Ministerial Task Force in a position to decide on the composition and departure of the team. We would be proceeding to Antigua in the first instance. And then from Antigua, we would move off to, we will move off to St. Martin and to the Turks and Caicos Islands. Now, St. Martin has a large number of Guyanese.
Okay.
And we understand that an fairly large number of Turks and Caicos. The current situation is, as we understand it, is that the people in Barbuda who are Guyanese, they are moving to Antigua because they have relatives there.
Okay.
And so their needs are lesser than those of our Guyanese brothers and sisters who are in Tortola and St. Martin.
Okay.
And so Antigua is so pressured that it is unreasonable to expect them to take off more of the Guyanese. So we are doing a needs assessment when we leave. A needs assessment of the resources, those who prefer to remain in St. Martin, those who prefer to remain in Tortola. Needs assessment of the materials they would need, and the needs assessment for the removal of those who would like to return to Guyana. As I understand it so far, some people in Tortola would prefer to tough it out than to come home, and for obvious reasons. But they would prefer to send the elderly and the children. Well, we're going to find out exactly what is the position.
Minister Felix, as you're speaking here, some people may have a concern. Here at home, and again, we love all of our Guyanese people, whether they're home or abroad, and we really and truly sympathize with them with what happens. But because of sometimes our situations, I mean, sometimes Guyanese, we blow things out of proportion, but people may be concerned as to if the majority of them choose to come back. Apart from you mentioned those in the Turks and Caicos may want to tough it out. But if the majority of them choose to return, people might have a concern as to whether at this time Guyana can take off, what possible pressure it may bring on the economy or the environment as a whole.
Well, the ministerial task force thought about that.
Okay.
We thought about the impact if all the Guyanese in St. Martin and Tortola and Barbuda wanted to return. I'm assured that not all want to return, and that is why it is important for us to do a needs assessment. And we cannot jump to conclusions as to what is required or what would be required when we arrive on the island. So we go there and we talk to people, we understand what their needs are, and we communicate back to the Ministerial Task Force and the Civil Defense Commission, and they will put in train the necessary action to give effect to responding to the needs in the islands.
I'm happy that you're doing that needs assessment indeed, so they can tell you, because in these situations we hear rumors and so on flying. From the information that you've been able to gather, let's talk about their immediate needs, like clothing, health, shelter, food. What have you been able to grasp? Are they being taken care of to an extent?
To an extent, the Guyanese in Antigua and Barbuda, I'm told, have little needs.
Okay.
Because they have been taken care of by their relatives and the support which other governments have been providing to Antigua. The issue in Tortola and St. Martin, those issues are the ones we really need to assess. We know for sure that they need water, some items of foodstuff. In some cases, they might need medical supplies, hygiene type support they would need. But those are limited to the information that we have been able to ascertain so far. And we go on the ground, we will get a clearer picture as to what would contribute to the health and the comfort of the Guyanese who were there. I was making the point just now that those in Tortola, they would prefer. The island is so badly damaged that they have worked it out already that there is no way that the schools will be rebuilt. And so they would prefer to have their children come back. But like I said, that is information, which means that we have to determine how many children there are and how would the Ministry of Education be able to slot them into schools according to the various age groups and categories that we have. So those are issues which are coming up.
I will want to eventually talk about the immigration services of itself, if that's correct. But even before you travel, sir, we have read and we have seen the photos that, for example, in St. Martin, the airport was, if not completely, almost completely destroyed. In terms of travel, how is that being accommodated?
Well, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for us to travel to the British Virgin Islands,
Yes.
Tortola being one, we required to get a visa. In the absence of a visa, some arrangement through the diplomatic channel would be put in place to facilitate our arrival. And similarly in St. Martin, once you have a U.S. visa, you will be allowed entry. But the immigration services which Guyanese would be providing are for those people who would either have damaged passports, lost passports, destroyed passports as a result of the harshness of the weather which the hurricane brought.
Yes.
And so we would need those who may have lost birth certificates completely. So we are going there to have a first-hand look as to what the situation is and how we can manage it from there on to ensure that Guyanese are returned to a state of comfort that would make them comfortable after and feeling that their government is taking care of them.
Okay.
Because the David Granger administration has been very concerned about the health, safety, and comfort of Guyanese who had to endure the harshness of Hurricane Irma. And so we will do everything in our power during the needs assessment
Yes.
to make sure that we can address the issues adequately in the days following.
All right, I'll come back to the needs assessment in just a bit. Viewers, if you're now tuning in, I'm having a conversation today with Minister of Citizenship, the Honorable Winston Felix, who is currently preparing to leave Guyana. He's going to be accompanied by a team to do a needs assessment in those Caribbean islands that would have been ravaged, in some cases, for example, Barbuda, completely destroyed by Hurricane Irma. For those of you who have still not heard from your relatives and friends, I ask that you keep praying, and hopefully by the time the minister and his team get back, they will be able to give Guyana a full and a proper briefing on how Guyana will be able to help, especially as it relates to immigration services and so on, how Guyana can be able to help your loved ones who are unfortunately stuck in those islands at this time. Minister, and I'm happy that you are stressing the fact that this is a needs assessment visit, a needs assessment trip. Will you be able, though, to do anything at all, especially with immigration services? And I guess this is where the consulates for the different countries, from Guyana to those different countries, will come in. Will you be able to get anything at all done on the ground? And if not, how long do you average it will take for us in Guyana to get moving? Because we understand it's a process, but...
Well, in my initial plan,
Yes.
and yesterday I put one into effect, is to link up with the various consular officials representing Guyana's interest in those islands. And yesterday I had a conversation with our consular officer in Antigua, and I would follow that up when I arrived there. And similarly, we were not in contact with the consular official in St. Martin, and I hope that by the time we get there, because we understand that he may have been hard hit by the hurricane. So we hope that by the time we get there, he would be in a situation where we can communicate and probably talk about the way forward. And similarly, whoever does the consular work for those in the Turks and Caicos, we would also want to establish an arrangement whereby continuous work, because continuous work can proceed, because all cannot be done in one day.
Yes.
So the needs assessment trip will also set up arrangements which we can follow through on in the subsequent days, because you can't get a passport replaced by just one visit. We will have to set up protocols and systems to get those Guyanese who have lost their passports or damaged during the hurricane, probably to waive the normal periods and to facilitate them, right? As against if they had lost it under other circumstances. So this is a special occasion, and certain considerations will have to kick in to ensure that certain hindrances which now exist would not in any way hinder the restoration of documents to persons who have their documents lost, damaged, or destroyed during the hurricane.
I know I'm probably pushing it here and asking you to look into a crystal ball, which you do not have. Do you assume, and can we facilitate if after your assessment you conclude that maybe when we may need to send a few technical officers from Guyana to one of those countries or a few of those countries to be stationed there for a while, or if you may need to even leave people? How are we looking?
Well,
can we facilitate that?
We have some resources on the ground already.
Okay.
And that is where the needs assessment becomes important. When we assess the situation, the number of persons in need of documents and so on, then we can determine whether it would be sensible, feasible, cost-effective to have persons deployed into those territories until the Guyanese community, their needs are met and satisfied within a relatively short period of time.
I understand that our priority really is our people, but the other citizens of those countries, have you been able to talk with whether it be the heads of states of those countries or other representatives that would have been put in place to just, for the sake of concern, to assess even the needs and the conditions of the people of those countries?
Malika, action is being taken at various levels.
Okay.
Insofar as talking to heads of government, our heads are talking to their counterparts.
Okay.
I would deal with my counterpart when I arrive in Antigua. I would be setting up an arrangement which would kick in upon arrival.
Okay.
Then we have the Civil Defense Commission dealing with CDIMA, which is the Caribbean Civil Defense Organization. And so action and communication is occurring at the various relevant levels to ensure that we keep moving the process of restoring Guyanese through the delivery of assistance in a relatively short period of time.
Okay. Before, and viewers, I did promise Minister Felix that I will only take 15 minutes of his very precious time, and I've gone past the 15 minutes, and he knows usually I'm a woman of my word. But he understands this is a case of disaster. Minister, before I let you go, what sentiments would you probably like to leave at this time with Guyanese, again, who are still concerned about their relatives and the friends in those areas and those communities as it relates to our own government's assistance and contributions? What would you like to leave with people who are still worried at this time?
Firstly, let me say this, that the government of Guyana is leaving no stone unturned to ensure that we deliver assistance to our Guyanese brethren and sisters who have been struck by the recent ravages of which Hurricane Irma brought to their lives. And we have been so far working with other governments, and our contribution to those efforts will proceed immediately upon the needs assessment commences. Information will be sent back, and action will be taken to make sure that the suffering which Guyanese would be enduring, that they are relieved of those suffering by our continued contribution to the emergency relief which is required in these circumstances. So let us see what is out there. Those in need of medical assistance, I'm sure that some recommendation would be provided, some help and assistance would be provided to those persons in need of medical assistance. So far, we've only heard about one Guyanese who has been deceased, and we will have to find out what the request is and in what way we can provide help, if help is required from the state. Okay. But let's see what comes, and decisions will be taken. Rest assured that the Guyana government stands solidly in support of those persons who are in need of assistance right now in the hurricane-stricken countries.
Okay, thank you so very much, Minister Felix. Those of you who are now joining, this would have been a conversation with Minister Felix regarding his, again, he's traveling in a few short hours to a few of those islands that were unfortunately hit and devastated by Hurricane Irma. And he was just giving an idea of what the trip is all about and what they expect and what they will do on the trip. Today is going to be a reasonably short program. What I will do is take a very short break and then come back with you, and I'll introduce the second half of Facing the Nation. Stay tuned. Thank you very much for staying tuned. Okay, I did say that we're going to have a reasonably short program this week. What is going to happen? Again, for those of you who missed that conversation, the earlier conversation with Minister Felix on the trip to those hurricane-ravaged islands, those of you who follow me on social media, the conversation will be posted to my YouTube channel and also to my Facebook page before the day's end. So in this case, it is information for you and information for anyone out there who can see it, that Guyana is indeed helping, and help is on the way, especially for our Guyanese brothers and sisters living in those countries. As you know, apart from Facing the Nation, there are two other programs that I do in the interest of our government and what our government is doing to improve the lives of Guyanese. One of them is West Side Story, that focuses mainly on what happens in Region 3, and the other, which recently began, is an NCN production, of course in collaboration with the Ministry of the Presidency to some extent. That is called Conversations in State. Now, last Saturday, I had a conversation with the CEO of the Gaming Authority and also Director Miss Christine King, and they outlined what the Gaming Authority is. And I thought that necessary, because most times when we hear about these agencies is when something negative happens and it's in the newspapers, and we forget what the purpose is, what the purpose of these agencies really are. Just for, again, public knowledge, and I did say in Conversations of State, there are a good amount of agencies that fall within the Ministry of the Presidency. The Minister of State's office, of course, is one of them. But you get more information from a part of the program that I'm about to ask our operator to pull up again. That program would have been Conversations in State, and my conversation would have been with two representatives from the Gaming Authority. Of course, this is Facing the Nation. Stay tuned. Ramsey. Thank you so very much for joining us. The last time we met, we spoke with Professor Suresh Narain, and of course he is the director of the Institute of Applied Science and Technology. Most of you know it as IAST. The reason I'm reminding you is, again, to also remind you that Conversations in State is a program that focuses on those agencies and departments that fall within the Ministry of the Presidency, of course all in the name of giving you information on their purpose and functions. Today it is my pleasure to be focusing on the Gaming Authority. That's one of the organizations, in this case authorities, that fall within, in terms of its functions, not physically, but in terms of its functions within the Ministry of the Presidency. To remind you, some of those other organizations and departments include the Department of Climate Change, Department of Citizenship. There is also Public Service, Environment, IAST, and as we continue in the coming weeks with Conversations in State, you'll learn more about all of those agencies. It is my pleasure today to be focusing on the Gaming Authority, and to talk about the Gaming Authority and its purposes and functions, I have in studio with me Ms. Christine King. She is the director of the Gaming Authority. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, great to have you. And of course, she's accompanied by Lloyd Moore, Mr. Lloyd Moore, who is the Chief Executive Officer, CEO of the Gaming Authority. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Malika.
Let's talk about the Gaming Authority. This is not an authority or an agency that's in the news often. So people will want to know and want to be reminded of its functions. What is the purpose of the Gaming Authority?
Okay. Before I just go straight to the functions, let us look at the reason or the rationale behind the setting up the Gaming Authority. Prior to 2007, gaming and gambling in Guyana came under what we call the Gambling Prevention Act 902, which basically indicated that gambling was restricted in Guyana, except for those that were catered for under that act. In 2007, that act was amended, and that amendment saw the inclusion of sections 27 to 33, which paved the way for licensed casinos and licensed casino operations to become lawful, and for the establishment of the Gaming Authority.
Okay.
This, in fact, did occur in 2008. In 2008, the minister responsible at that time made regulations to have the Gaming Authority established and to set out prescribed fees that had to be paid by persons who wanted to set up casino operations. In fact, it was on the 31st of October 2008 when the regulation came into being. And the regulations for the fees came into being on the 10th of November of the same year.
The same year.
So these regulations actually stipulated the composition, the form, the functions, and the responsibilities of the Gaming Authority. At the same time, it sets out the type of licenses that we could have issued, it sets out the fees that had to be paid, and also the financial obligations of the holders of casino operation licenses.
Okay. In anything you do, any organization, there would have been challenges before all of this. Do you find that since you've had the amendments and so on, and the new additions, that it has helped the authority to run somewhat smoothly? Smoother than it was running before?
No, you see, the amendment is what put the Gambling Authority in place. Prior to that, there was no.
There was nothing at all.
There's a law, but there's no Gambling Authority. So basically, this allowed for there to be an authority that can regulate. Let me go a little bit further.
Sure.
In 2009, with the enactment of what we call the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter Financing of Terrorism Act, let's say the AML-CFT for short, Act of 2009. What we saw happen is that the Gaming Authority now became a supervisory body for casinos in Guyana, which means that we had to ensure that they were compliant with the Act, which is the AML-CFT Act. It took us to another level. And basically it saw the Gaming Authority taking on a role much more than just that was intended initially. As we go forward with the discussions, I will examine and explain exactly how that affected the way in which we operate.
All right. I know in terms of running the Gaming Authority, directors are necessary. Ms. King, would you like to talk about the new board of directors?
Yes, but before I do, I think I'd like to talk about the mission of the authority. The mission, as Mr. Moore said, it's a body that regulates gaming in Guyana. So our intention as a board is to provide effective leadership and regulatory oversight of gaming in Guyana for the growth and development of a lucrative industry that supports the national economy. So we're not just giving license for gaming and so on. We're trying to ensure that at least the Gaming Authority contributes to the national economy.
To the economy. Okay.
And our vision too is to position Guyana as a leading and international recognized jurisdiction with a well-managed and effectively regulated gaming industry.
In terms of feedback, and I'm happy that you did talk about Guyana being a recognized jurisdiction, have you been able to get feedback maybe from outside of Guyana in terms of people not only recognizing the Gaming Authority, but every operation that would fall under the Gaming Authority?
Well, we've been in touch with a number of agencies abroad, Jamaica. Recently, we met with some people in St. Lucia. We've been meeting with people so that at the level of the board, we can be better prepared to be able to deal with the issues that confront us. Right. We recognize the need for training. Okay. Board members have had some training, and we intend to have ourselves better equipped. We intend for the staff to be trained as well, because this is something new to us, and we cannot be doing our work groping in the dark. It's important that we properly equip them, have the right tools to do our work.
Okay, great. Let's talk about the directors now, if you want to.
No, the directors, we were appointed in April 2016, the new board, and the chairman of the board is Mr. Royce Ford. He's an attorney at law. The secretary is Mrs. Peter Chandan Edmonds. She's also an attorney at law. Mr. George Vaughan, he's an accountant, and yours truly.
Viewers, to remind you, especially those of you who missed it at the beginning, Ms. King is the director.
Yes, so, well, we were sworn in 2016, and since then we've had several meetings. We have our usual statutory meeting, but we meet ever so often as is necessary to address different issues that relate to the Gaming Authority. Initially, we had no home. We had a small office that within a month we were asked to vacate. So we had no home. We are now housed at South Road. We have a building there in South Road next to iPad. And we also saw the need to appoint a competent chief executive officer. We advertised, we interviewed quite a few persons, and we eventually got Mr. Moore.
Okay.
We also advertised for a compliance officer, for an accountant, for an admin officer. And so we have those on board. But of course we need other staff, and from time to time we'll be seeing our advertisements in the news. We want to be sure that we have the best, because I think, I shouldn't say I think, the board is concerned that whatever we do is above board.
Yes.
And that we follow all the regulations that are before us before we make the decisions that we have to make.
Okay. This is for both of you. Mr. Moore, CEO Moore, you spoke about the establishment and so on of the Gaming Authority. Ms. King, you talked about the mission statement. At this point, because unfortunately, and we were just discussing this before we went on air, and unfortunately, sometimes these organizations, again in this case the Gaming Authority, you only hear about or you focus on certain organizations when there's a negative put out there. How would you, apart from the establishment and the mission statement, how would you encourage the public or let the public know that really and truly Gaming Authority is a very important body in our society to ensure that everything is above board and so on? What would you say to people who still have, a kind of a standoffish or a negative thing, what really is this authority?
Well, it's the intention of the board. Well, as I said, the new board members were sworn in April 2016, and since then we had a lot of work to do. But among the things we plan to do is to have effective PR. It's important, we feel, to have information shared with the public. I think the CEO might be able to tell you more, because there's a plan for us to go to the various regions, to have some multi-stakeholder meetings to help people to understand who we are. And I guess there will be other things that we can do, flyers, maybe some public announcements. But we intend to involve the public, let them know who we are. Because, of course, people hear about gaming, and they want to know what gaming is.
Yes.
So you have to explain. And I may explain to you, but then there are others out there who would really like to know what gaming is. And so there's a need for us to have proper public relations.
And then, unfortunately, most times us, if I can refer to us as coastlanders, we try to, in our minds, we put everything into Region 4,
Yes.
even if not Region 4 in Central Georgia at least. So, there is a need indeed to take it outside of our region. CEO Moore.
I just add a bit to that, right? What we've recognized since what I've recognized since coming on board, I've listened to what the directors have got to say in our meetings, to understand the direction in which they want to take the authority, to understand the nuances of where we need to be. So that effect for 2018, in the planning of the budget, we have established a few programs. One of the major programs for next year is what we call the Stakeholders Engagement Forum, in which we'll be having discussions with the public, John public, and other stakeholders on issues that relates to gambling, in particular when it comes to responsible gambling or gaming and harm minimization, the harms that can come from gambling. We have to address it. It's the largest part of what we propose for in the budget, okay? Because we've recognized from studies that have been done overseas, because sadly to say, right, I have not as yet seen a study that was done of gambling in Guyana. I've seen studies done for other countries and for other areas. Those studies have guided us to understand that we need to have a program that makes the public fully aware of every aspect of gaming and gambling, so that when persons go there to game or to gamble, they can do so responsibly, and they can understand that there's certain things they can do to minimize any harm to themselves or a family in the course of gaming or gambling.
It's interesting that you're saying that, you haven't yet seen any official studies done on gambling. So as is right now, we're going on basically, and I know nothing is wrong with that, but are we basically going on what we've observed in society in terms of the gaming sector?
No. This is the sad thing about it that happens now these days. Today, events, we are now catching up with events.
Okay.
Gaming and the different forms of gaming are here. They're here in Guyana. They've come from other jurisdiction, but they're here in Guyana today. The problem that we have is that they're unregulated. In some cases, some people would say they're unlawful. And why they would say it's unlawful is because in Guyana, what we have is a gambling Prevention Act.
Act.
We don't have a gaming act. We don't have a gambling act. Okay? So then you can look at the intent of the then framers to say that what they wanted to do was to prevent all forms of gambling in Guyana, with the exception of those which they expressly placed into the act.
So just to make it clear, because it can be a bit confusing, those amendments that you talked about earlier added to, or should I say, did that somewhat change the Gambling Prevention Act?
Yes, it changed the entire scenario. It allowed now for casino gambling to become legal. Now, here's where we have, sometimes we walk into a bit of murky water, but the water is not really murky. There's some mud at the bottom and there's clear water at the top. But there's some people who just kick in the mud up to make it look murky. But when it settles again, there'll be clear water at the top and there'll be the mud at the bottom. Right? Basically what we find happening here is that a number of new forms of gaming and gambling has entered our society. And they're being operated unregulated. We have now got to do either one of two things. Right? We've either got to go after them with the law, find the necessary, manpower to be able to close them down or do whatever we have to do them, or we regulate them. We have a choice. Okay? The much more efficient thing to do, in my opinion, is to regulate. To regulate for those which are acceptable to society, or which can be accepted by society, and to ensure that those that are not acceptable are kept to the minimum, that we restrict them as far as we possibly can. Okay? So it's not a question of us making a law to just bring something in. These things are already here. All these forms of gaming are here. And we now have to ensure that we can have them regularized.
Okay, all right, great. Viewers, if you're now tuning in, this is our second edition of Conversations in State. And for those of you who missed it earlier, Conversations in State is designed to focus on those agencies, authorities, departments that function in a sense, not necessarily physically, but within the Ministry of the Presidency. And the idea is to give information and to remind you of the purposes that these agencies and so on serve, not necessarily a confrontational one. I think that we have enough negatives out there. This program does not need to add to the negatives. On the note of negatives, though, as a gaming authority, there are possible challenges that could come up in terms of for the directors, for the CEO, and so in terms of the functions. In your minds, even without revealing too much, do you have a way that you would want to deal with these challenges that would come? For example, let me give an example. People who may go back to being against gambling and being against any form of gambling in Guyana, which would bring into the act that we talked about earlier.
Okay, like I said to you, next year one of the largest programs that we plan to have is the stakeholders, what we call the awareness program, which will go out and speak to people.
Including religious bodies.
Yes, religious bodies have their duty to perform. We cannot go against that. It is their duty to preach against, to advise against things that they feel are not wholesome or not with keeping with their belief. They have a right and a duty, and that must never be stopped. That is the balance that keeps any society going. Let's look at it this way. If I may steal a little bit from the good book, it was Christ who said, "Render to Caesar what is Caesar, and unto God what is God." We live in a world where there are issues that deals with our religion, and the issues that are of the world. We cannot remove ourselves from that. Here's where we live. Okay? There are people who will live for their religious belief, and there are other people who will live for the world. We have the two, and we need to balance it. Okay, so the religious persons will speak, we will have to listen, and they will have to understand at sometimes where we stand. Again, I want to use something again from the good book. Let's look at Joseph. Child of God, son of Israel, but he was a ruler in Egypt. They were not people of color. But he was made a ruler there. And what he brought to Egypt is something which we are supposed to bring to gambling in Guyana, or the gaming in Guyana. He brought the grace that is necessary, the understanding that is necessary to ensure that if persons are going to play or be in a game, that it's done in a fair and above board manner.
Exactly.
That is what we're here for. We're here to ensure that any form of gaming or gambling is done in Guyana is done responsibly, is done fairly. We do not care who you are. Once you meet the criteria that have been set out under the law, we will ensure that you are licensed to do what you have to do. And we will monitor you for compliance under every single act that has been set out that we are responsible for. We will ensure we will not back off of any issues when it comes to that. And as I speak here, I'm very emotional when it comes to that part of our work. I see things in a strict way, this way. Laws are made for people, not people for laws. If a law becomes obsolete or it's unfair, then you either repeal it, amend it, or you change it. Once it's a law, we adhere to it. It's a simple process.
And to add to what was just said, I think from the outset we're prepared for the challenge. We know that sometimes we had to deal with some challenges, and we've been following what has been happening in the news ever since the Gaming Authority came into existence. So we are aware that some people will object. We are aware that some people will expect us to turn a blind eye and do what they would want us to do.
Yes.
But as the CEO said, we intend to operate above board, and we intend to observe the laws. Right? That's our mission. That's what we'll do. And as long as people understand that, I don't think we have a problem.
No problem. Okay. As you prepare to condition your minds for the stakeholders meeting that you talked about that is going to happen next year, how has the sector of itself, as I may be wrong here and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's still a small sector in terms of the gaming sector, how has it responded so far? And again, this is even without going into too much of the controversial stuff and so on. How has the sector of itself responded?
Yeah, it's an emerging sector in India. It's emerging. It's at its beginning stages. Okay, so I always say if you're going to have something, have the best. Learn from the best. Take the best and do the best. So we'll have to ensure the practices that we put in place are the best practices. We need to look at countries who have put in place practices that are, what should I say, that has given them the better results in terms of gaming. And it's not going to be easy. I think it's because it's very costly to put in place some of the measures that they have put in place. But it's going to ensure that operations operate within the mandate that has been set for us. It will take a lot of will for us to be able to do what we have to do in the way in which it's supposed to be done. And that's all I can say at this moment.
At this point. All right. You talked about the fact that it is still an emerging sector. Do you anticipate, even with all of the plans, you both spoke about even the board of directors and so on, do you anticipate quick growth in that sector?
Well, because of regulations, people have to follow procedure. And that takes time. There's certain things that are required in order for people to get licensing. That will take some time. So I'm not sure about the quick. But yes, it will catch on. And we'll have applications coming in for proper licensing, yes.
All right. Well, I'm sure the amount of information you both gave today has given the viewers a good idea about what the Gaming Authority is. But we just have about 2 more minutes left before we have to wrap up today's conversation. And I will give both of you an opportunity to leave, in the minds of the public positive things, even though our conversation was indeed a positive one. Just an opportunity to leave some wrap-up sentiments with our viewers regarding the Gaming Authority, beginning with you, Ms. King.
The Gaming Authority is, as I said earlier, is a regulatory body.
Mm-hmm.
It's not here to drive fear into anyone.
Okay.
It is just set up to do what is right. All right? We really don't want to be, I don't think any of us in the Gaming Authority would want to be seen as dealing with anything that is unlawful or illegal. It's just for the enjoyment and leisure of the persons who would like to do gaming. And so I'd like to say as a board member that anyone who's interested in applying for a license to be sure that they know what they have to do, and to present to us all the required documents before we can approve.
All right. Before I go to Mr. Moore, how can they get to you again? Just a reminder, because I think you did say this in the beginning of the program.
Yes, we have a telephone number here. It's oh gosh, let me see. We're on South Road, 252 South Road, Georgetown, just next to iPad, and our numbers are 225-4446 or 225-4449.
Okay. All right. Thank you. CEO.
Okay. Basically, just to add to what Ms. King said just now, our job is to ensure that once gaming comes here to Guyana, that it's done in a very safe and a well-regulated environment. We have to ensure that persons or operators within the gaming environment operate in a manner that is in keeping with the act and the law.
Okay.
Once you do that, you're not going to have any problem with the Gaming Authority. We're here to support the operations of these persons who intend to do legitimate and, what should I say, responsible gaming in Guyana.
Thank you
That's all.
so very much. Unfortunately, we have to put a wrap on today's edition of Conversations in State. I would have been chatting with the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the Gaming Authority, Mr. Lloyd Moore, and also Director of the Gaming Authority, one of the directors, Ms. Christine King. Of course, I am Malika Ramsey, and this has been Conversations in State. Thanks for watching. These days I try to my very best to give you 2 in 1, all for the purpose of giving information. Because as I said during that program, of course, that was a live program that was aired last Saturday. Yes, I'm sorry. I think I froze there for a second. I'm getting my weeks and my days mixed up because there's so much going on right now. Yes, that program would have been last Saturday, and Conversations in State is every other Saturday, and it's aired on. It's a live program on NCN actually, and of course it was recorded. And one of the things that I would have said there is, it is important to put some of these agencies out there, the information about these agencies out there, because it's not until negative things hit the airwaves, then, we focus on what's what and how long has it been in existence and what it's been doing and so on. I think we need to, as a citizen, as a society, we need to come out of what we're somewhat in a bubble. We only deal with the things that are easy picks, easy targets. If it's a city council issue, it's a crime and a security. And mind you, I'm not trying to reduce the importance of crime and security, because I know some of you can misinterpret what I'm saying. But my point is that we pick on the things that are right in front of us. The easy, they're easy targets. Let's get deeper. Let's go into those agencies that are there and doing work that should be done, and in essence actually contributing to what really and truly holds the fabric of our society together. So Conversations in State is more or less designed to do that, to go beneath what we see every day and the things that we deal with every day, the garbage, the traffic accidents, the crime. Again, these are problems and these are issues that we need to fix, but there are other things happening in society, and it increases your knowledge. It extends your knowledge about what really is going on in your country. So especially for those of you who travel often, you can have informed and intellectual conversations. Not when you go overseas, it's always about, oh, Guyana, we got garbage. Guyana, we have crime. Guyana, we have accidents. Guyana, when it rains, it floods. You must be able to talk about other things in your country, and especially now, and I know the big conversation is oil now, but let's put ourselves and our minds in a position, in a frame, where we can let the world know that Guyana is more than one or two sectors, the one or two sectors that we focus on and we stress on. Unfortunately, I'm going to leave you here from the program for today, but I want to take this opportunity again to thank very much the Minister of Citizenship, the Honorable Winston Felix, who came. He is preparing to leave for some of those hurricane-ravaged islands. And of course, I'm repeating this for those of you who would have just joined the program and you missed that conversation. He's preparing to leave to visit some of those islands. He really indicated that the ones really badly damaged are Turks and Caicos, of course, St. Martin. Barbuda is completely gone. I was reading an article this morning saying that I think for the first time in 300 years, there is not a single living person on the island of Barbuda. So that island is completely gone. But they're in a better position because, as we know, it is a twin island. It is Antigua Barbuda. So those people who were displaced in Barbuda, which Hurricane Irma completely destroyed, those people have gone over to Antigua and they have been rescued by their families and friends and loved ones and so on. So in terms of the islands hit by Hurricane Irma, Antigua is in the best position. They're basically, because I also have friends living there, and they have basically been living a normal life because they've been able to rescue the Barbudans and so on. But I know they will still be doing building back and so forth, but Minister Felix and an entire team will be going there to do a needs assessment. Again, those of you who are now joining and you missed the conversation, I prefer you hear it from him. So if you follow me on social media, my YouTube channels and my Facebook page will have that part of today's program. Unfortunately, I'm going to leave you. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, let me take this opportunity to remind you that we're still in the month of education. I'm still working on getting officials from the Ministry of Education to come on Facing the Nation. Let's hope that happens before the month ends. So, yes, we're still in the month of education and also the month of Indigenous Peoples Affairs. So just keep that in mind as you go about your daily practices and schedules and so on. Until next week, I am Malika Ramsey, as always, thanking you for joining me and encouraging you to be good Guyanese citizens. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. This has been Facing the Nation.